So today I'm going to show you guys how to use the UVW and the UVUnwrap modifiers. So here we have a wonderfully comfy looking couch, and I am going to kind of apply a material onto it. So what I'm going to first work on is this base frame. With it selected, I'm going to open up the material editor. And what I want to do is I have this color swatch pattern, that I want to apply to the sofa. And I strongly suggest for this exercise you use a pattern that is square and tileable, which means that you can put one next to each other and it will look seamless. So as you can see, I have this first one material selected. I'm going to click this button right here next to diffuse, select the bitmap and OK. And I'm going to select that fabric pattern, and it's just in a JPEG, and I'm going to hit open. Now I want to apply it to that piece. So now that I have it selected, I'm just going to click and drag it over. As you can see, you haven't noticed much of a chain, but that's because I haven't clicked on Show Shaded Material in Viewport. Once I do that, you see that it's applied the material, but it's a little big, so I'm going to go to tiling and kind of make it a little bit smaller so it looks a little better. So I'm going to close this now, and it looks right, but if you turn to the back you see that it's not quite working. So to help it wrap around the object, I'm going to add the UVW modifier to it. So I'm going to, with it still selected, I'm going to go to the modifier list and find the UVW map modifier, and it got a little messed up, but don't worry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look under mapping, and right now it's selected planar. What you want to do here is kind of select the object that it most resembles. In this case it's still box-like, so I'm going to select that. As you can see, it's wrapped around all the right sides, but the pattern is still kind of messed up, so you can see that it kind of stretched the length, width, and height unevenly, so it's kind of stretching out my pattern. This is where you want to be sure that you are using a square texture. So I'm just going to change these all to, let's say, that's still too small. Let's go 60, 60, and 60. Yeah, that looks better. So now you can see that it wraps very well along all sides. Now the problem with this is that sometimes you have geometry, let's turn on edged faces, that is not as even. So like take a look at this pillow, and it's kind of mushed out around, and it's not quite square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new material with the same pattern by clicking on diffuse, bitmap, and that fabric. I'm going to drag it over here. So as you can see, when I apply this, that the lines remain straight, but the geometry is still kind of crooked. So it's not quite realistic, right? Obviously, if this was real, then the fabric would follow the contours of the geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the UVUnwrap modifier to this. So I'm going to find it in the modifier list with the object selected. And you can see that some of these green lines appear, and I'll explain that in a second. So what this does is it kind of takes apart the geometry, and you can see that by going under Edit UVs and Open UV Editor. Now when I do that, you can see that you can see those green lines, and what it has done is it's kind of flattened the geometry. And what I want to do is I want to apply first we need to see the texture, so I can go under this drop down right here and select the pattern. And what I want to do is I want this to kind of go along the geometry of the object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the polygons here on the front of the pillow. And as you can see, it kind of updates in the UV editor what objects I've selected. So now what I can do is I'm going to, if I grab it and move it around, you see in the viewport that it's kind of adjusting accordingly. First thing I'm noticing is that the squares are not the right size, so I'm going to scale selected subobjects, which is the third button over, and I'm just going to, oops, and I want to make sure it's going proportionally. Oops. So I'm going to hold down Control. Oops, and I deselected one, so hold on Control, and it's going to kind of allow me to fine-tune it. So I'm just move off to the side, and I'm going to deselect it for now. And what you see now, let's turn off, let's close the editor for now, turn off edge faces, is you can see that it's actually hugging the geometry and following the contours of the pillow. Now what you want to do next is you just kind of want to go along, select faces, and let's handle the top now. I'm going to open up that UV editor again. Oops. And I'm going to, first I got to make sure I got everything. I'm grabbing stuff on the bottom, so let's back up a little bit here. I'm just going to grab everything in the center area right now for the sake of time, and then I can go and I'm just going to do the same thing. Oops. This is getting difficult because I can't see behind it, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up here, oops, and I'm going to hide unselected so that I'm just looking at the pillow. That'll make this a lot easier. So let's go back in and let's take care of the back really quick. Okay, so let's move this here, open up the UV editor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I want to make sure it's the same size. So, whoops. Alright, I'm going to deselect, and you can see now the front and back match. So now I just have these side pieces, which for the most part are okay, but I'm going to grab those and I'm going to just move this to the side. Actually, let's back up a second. Just so I don't get confused, I'm going to move this over here. Now I'm going to go back and work on these. Now I want to see if I can make this a bit more consistent with everything else on the screen. Oops. So I'm going to put it right about there, and let's move it off to the side. And you can do one side at a time, but for the sake of timing, I'm just going to kind of do it all at once. So now when I deselect, and I zoom in, let's just look at the thing as a whole. You can see that now the whole thing is very closely hugging the contours of the pillow. Now, this isn't the end of it. I mean, you can see there's a little inconsistencies here. So if I open up the UV editor, what I can do is, let's make it so I can see the edged faces. You can see there's some problems down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find those points, and I can see here on the pillow, and I'm just going to, well, since this isn't uneven on both sides, that side looks fine. So what I can do is, let's find, let's close that for now. And I'm going to go to vertex. I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. So it's nice and even. The problem, what happened here, is that as in the UV editor, it kind of spread everything out evenly. Go back to UV map. And that's a little bit better. I mean, there's some more tweaking that can go in there. The other thing you can do is, if you have this selected and you go into the UV editor, if you move a point in here, it's going to adjust accordingly on the geometry, as you can see here, which right now we don't really want to do. I mean, because if I move it here, you just have to be careful, because I had the right buttons or right vertex selected here, but if I accidentally selected, let's say, all of them and moved it, it's going to affect every single side. So you just want to make sure that you're accurate in your selections. So there you go. You have two different ways that you can apply a material to a more complex object. Let's unhide all. You just have to kind of make the decision what suits which object the best. Again, the UVW modifier is much better for basic objects, but once they get more complex, especially when you get into like character animation and texturing a character, you're going to want to use the UVW unwrap modifier.